The story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood. At first glance, everything about 29-year-old Clara Benson seemed perfect. She had a stable job, a fiancé who adored her, and a future filled with promise. Friends described her as ambitious, always wanting to climb higher, always looking for the next big thing. But behind the carefully painted image of success was a woman under enormous pressure. Clara was drowning in debts she kept hidden, and her relationship with her fiancé was beginning to crack. What no one realized was that beneath her charm was a darker streak, one that would soon turn destructive. In late summer, Clara's life took a turn. She claimed she was being stalked. Strange things, she said, kept happening around her apartment. Her tires were slashed. She heard footsteps at night. She even swore someone tried to break into her car. Neighbors grew worried, and soon, the police were involved. At first, it seemed like a case of an innocent woman being harassed. But Clara had an unusual detail to add. She said she knew who was behind it. A stranger she claimed to have seen lurking in the shadows. The problem? The stranger she described had never set foot near her home. Clara pointed the finger at a man named Ethan Cole. Ethan was a quiet, soft-spoken 35-year-old who lived across town. He was a freelance IT technician, spending most of his days indoors, coding. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, nothing to suggest he could be the monster Clara described. But Clara was convincing. She told police she had seen Ethan before, that he followed her after work, stood outside her window, and even left threatening notes on her car. She cried as she explained how terrified she was, how she couldn't sleep at night. Her performance worked. The police took her report seriously. They even visited Ethan, catching him off guard. Ethan, bewildered, insisted he didn't even know who Clara was. He had never met her, never spoken to her, never even driven near her neighborhood. But Clara's story sounded airtight. She had scratches on her arm she said were from fighting Ethan off. She had a photo of a dark figure she claimed was him. And she had the tears, the trembling voice, the victimhood that swayed those around her. The seeds of a frame-up had been planted. When the accusation hit, Ethan's quiet life fell apart overnight. He was brought in for questioning. His neighbors whispered. His landlord looked at him differently. Suddenly, the man who spent his days fixing computers was now being painted as a predator. The humiliation and fear cut deep. Ethan had always kept to himself, and now that very isolation was used against him. Police began building a case, relying heavily on Clara's testimony. And though Ethan provided alibis, time-stamped work logs, client statements, Clara's emotional story overshadowed his evidence. Even Ethan's family began to wonder. Could there be a part of him they never knew? Ethan was living a nightmare. A stranger's words held more weight than his truth. Detectives noticed something odd. Clara insisted Ethan had followed her late at night, yet surveillance cameras on her street showed no sign of him, or anyone. Still, Clara had props. She showed investigators a threatening note left on her doorstep. But handwriting analysts noted inconsistencies. The writing looked forced, unnatural, as if Clara had tried to disguise her own script. One detective voiced suspicion. Was Clara faking this entire ordeal? But it was too early to accuse a supposed victim. Investigators walked a thin line, balancing sympathy for Clara with the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't right. Then came the smoking gun, a strand of hair that would change everything. During a routine sweep of Clara's apartment, detectives collected items she claimed were touched by Ethan. A window latch, a car door handle, a piece of clothing she said he tore during a struggle. Forensics tested everything. And then, it appeared. A single strand of hair, caught on the torn fabric. Clara insisted it belonged to Ethan. But DNA testing told a different story. It wasn't Ethan's hair. It was Clara's. She had shed it while staging the scene, unaware that in her rush to play victim, she had planted her own DNA where it didn't belong. Detectives now had proof something was wrong. But could they prove intent? Detectives didn't confront Clara immediately. Instead, they kept the DNA result quiet, while asking Clara for more details. They let her expand her lies, watching as her story shifted. When asked to describe Ethan again, her details grew inconsistent. When shown a lineup photo, she hesitated before picking him. Meanwhile, Ethan was holding on to hope. His lawyer pushed hard, pointing to the DNA evidence as a turning point. For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of relief. But Clara wasn't done. She had one more trick up her sleeve. Cornered but unwilling to back down, Clara escalated. She staged a break-in at her own apartment. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, even self-inflicted bruises. She called 911 sobbing, insisting Ethan had broken in and attacked her again. The police rushed over. At first glance, it looked convincing, but forensic experts quickly noticed flaws. The glass was scattered in the wrong direction, bruises were patterned too neatly, and neighbors reported hearing nothing. Still, Clara wept and begged for protection. To some, she looked like a terrified victim. To others, she looked like a woman performing. And soon, her performance would collapse completely. Detectives finally confronted Clara with the DNA results. They explained how the hair she claimed was Ethan's was actually hers. They showed her the inconsistencies in her statements. They pressed her hard. At first, Clara tried to deny it, but under mounting pressure, her composure cracked. She stammered, grew defensive, and finally, her story unraveled. The motive. Clara admitted she had fabricated the stalking because she was desperate for attention and sympathy. Her relationship was failing, her debts were rising, and she thought painting herself as a victim would earn her love, loyalty, and maybe even financial support. But though she confessed, the damage had already been done to Ethan's life, his reputation, and his peace of mind. Though cleared of all charges, Ethan's life would never be the same. His reputation was shattered. Friends had doubted him, clients had walked away, neighbors still whispered. The stigma of being accused stuck with him. And worse, the emotional scars ran deep. He had experienced firsthand how a lie could nearly destroy his freedom. Ethan spoke publicly about the ordeal, not for pity, but to warn others. His voice carried weight. False accusations don't just ruin reputations, they ruin lives. But what about Clara? Would she face justice for what she had done? Clara was arrested for filing false police reports, obstruction of justice, and staging evidence. In court, her victim act fell apart completely. The judge condemned her actions, emphasizing the danger of false accusations, not only for the innocent man she tried to destroy, but for real victims of crime, whose voices risked being doubted because of liars like her. Clara was sentenced, though not nearly as long as Ethan thought was fair. For him, the scars were permanent. The story didn't end in the courtroom, because Clara's case sparked a bigger conversation nationwide. When Clara's lies came to light, the case exploded across news headlines. Social media lit up with debates. Some demanded harsher punishment, others argued she was sick and needed help, not prison. But the strongest reaction came from survivors of real stalking and abuse. Many said Clara had made their struggles harder, that every time a liar was exposed, real victims faced increased skepticism. Ethan, though cleared, struggled with bitterness. He felt robbed of his peace, his dignity, and his trust in the system. To him, Clara's sentence felt like a slap on the wrist compared to what she had put him through. And across the country, people were asking the same question. Should someone who tries to ruin another person's life with lies face the same punishment as the crime they tried to invent? Ethan eventually agreed to a televised interview. Nervous but determined, he sat down and told his side of the story. His voice shook as he described the humiliation, the police visits, the looks from neighbors, and the way even his own family hesitated to believe him. "I was guilty in people's eyes before I ever had a chance to prove myself innocent," he said. And it all started with a story that wasn't real. The interview struck a chord nationwide. Many saw Ethan as a symbol of the silent suffering of those falsely accused. He wasn't angry on camera, he was heartbroken. And that heartbreak resonated far more than anger ever could. Clara's family was blindsided by her lies. They had believed her story too, comforting her when she cried, urging her to stay strong. They defended her publicly. And then, the truth came crashing down. Her parents, devastated, issued a statement condemning her actions. Her fiancé left her, ending their engagement. Friends cut ties. Clara's carefully crafted image of success and charm collapsed into disgrace. And while she served her sentence, she became a pariah even inside jail. Inmates ridiculed her for pretending to be a victim while others around her had faced genuine trauma. The case sparked heated debates in law schools, police departments, and advocacy groups. Some argued that harsher laws were needed to punish false accusers. Others feared going too far would discourage real victims from coming forward. But Ethan's ordeal gave fuel to a larger conversation: how easily lives can be ruined by lies, and how difficult it is to repair the damage. Journalists dug into similar cases, uncovering story after story where innocent men and women had been accused of crimes they never committed. Ethan's story was not unique. It was part of a troubling pattern. Experts began dissecting Clara's behavior. Why would someone fabricate an elaborate lie at such high personal risk? Psychologists suggested multiple motives: a desperate need for attention, manipulation for sympathy, or even subconscious self-sabotage. Clara had been under stress, debts, relationship cracks, a collapsing sense of control. And in that chaos, she built a false story where she could play the victim. But what shocked experts most wasn't the lie itself. It was how far she was willing to go. Self-inflicted injuries, staged crime scenes, tearful performances. Clara crossed line after line, convinced she could outsmart everyone. Through it all, Ethan chose not to let bitterness consume him. Instead, he poured his energy into rebuilding. He moved to a new city, started fresh with new clients, and leaned on the few friends who had stood by him. But he carried lessons with him, lessons about trust, about resilience, about how fragile reputations really are. He became an advocate, speaking at schools and universities about the dangers of false accusations. "It's not just about me," he would say. "It's about protecting truth, because without truth, justice doesn't exist." Lawmakers began referencing Ethan's case when proposing bills to address false reporting. Some pushed for mandatory minimum sentences. Others suggested restorative justice programs, where false accusers would have to directly face those they harmed. The case even entered pop culture. Documentaries, podcasts, and talk shows debated Clara's actions. Some painted her as a villain, others as a cautionary tale. Either way, her name became synonymous with deception. And through it all, Ethan's name was tied to hers, forever linked to a nightmare he never asked for. After serving her time, Clara was released quietly. She returned to a world that no longer welcomed her. Jobs were hard to find. Neighbors avoided her. Online, her name still pulled up endless headlines about her lies. For someone who once craved attention, anonymity became her only refuge. But even that was tainted. Wherever she went, someone recognized her face from the news. Clara tried to rebuild, but the weight of her actions followed her everywhere. The lie she thought would earn her sympathy had instead destroyed her future. The story of Clara and Ethan left lasting lessons for everyone who followed it. For police, the importance of verifying every detail, no matter how convincing a victim may seem. For the public, the reminder not to rush to judgment without evidence. For lawmakers, the urgent need to balance protecting real victims with punishing those who weaponize lies. And for Ethan, it was the painful truth that innocence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes, it takes a fight to prove what you already know in your heart. Looking back, Ethan described the experience as a scar he would carry for life. He found strength in surviving it, but he never downplayed the damage. "Clara may have served her sentence," he said, "but I'm serving mine every day. The whispers, the doubts, the memory of being treated like a monster, it never fully goes away." Yet he refused to let the lie define him. His story became more than just about false accusations. It became about resilience, truth, and the importance of standing firm even when the world doubts you. The case closed, but the lessons remain. False accusations are more than lies. They are weapons. And in this story, one woman tried to use that weapon, but a single strand of hair exposed the truth.